Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabati ajma'in. Allahumma inni nawayta at-ta'allum wa ta'lim wa at-tadhakkura wa at-tadhkir wa an-naf'a wal intifa' wal ifadata wal istifada wal hatha ala tamassuki bi kitabillahi wa sunnati rasulihi sallallahu alayhi wa sallama wa ad-du'a ila al-huda wa dalala ala al-khair ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم يا الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ومولانا محمد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. So we had reached on page 47 the second of the four things that the Imām said that you should leave. Remember, he said, I'm going to now tell you four things that you should leave and four things that you should stick to. And the second of the things that he said that you should leave are as follows. He says, and again I'll read it in Arabic, وَالثَّانِي أَن تَكُونَ عِلَّتُهُ مِنَ الْحَمَاقَةِ وَهُوَ أَيْضًا لَا يَقْبَلُ الْعِلَاجِ كما قال عيسى عليه السلام إني ما عجزت عن إحياء الموتى وقد عجزت عن معالجة الأحمق. So the Imam says a second, and this is, I beg your pardon, in relation to, just to, you'll recall that he's giving us advice about these people who, that ignorance is a disease. And I've always said this, ignorance is a disease, its cure is knowledge. And so the Imam is telling us that there's four types of ignorance. And three of those types of ignorance are curable and one is incurable. Three are incurable and only one is curable. And he says, and this is the second type of incurable ignorance. He says, the second has foolishness as his sickness, and he too is incurable. As Isa alayhi salam said, verily I was not incapable of bringing the dead to life, but I was incapable of curing the fool. Now, just a couple of things about these, because the words that the Imam uses here are ahmaq and hamaqa. And in the translation we have fool, stupidity, and idiot. And we can just touch on these quickly. And the important thing to keep in mind is that these are not name calling. The Imam's not calling someone a name. He's not denigrating someone. He's not trying to abuse someone. He's not trying to put someone down. It's not that. A fool, or let's look at the Arabic first. In Arabic, al-ahmaq is someone who has an unsound understanding. So you just don't get things, right? You're either slow, don't really understand, you're not really given to knowledge, you're not really given to reading, whatever it may be. It's not trying to put someone down. It's just describing someone. Or has some defect in their intellect. In fact, in ancient medicine, an idiot was someone who had an intellectual disability. This is an actual name, it's a technical name. If you call someone an idiot, it's like saying someone has a headache. There's something wrong with you. Right? You wouldn't say to someone who has some sickness, when you refer to them with that sickness, you won't say to them, oh, you're putting someone down. No, you're just stating a fact. So ahmaq is someone who has an unsound intellect or some defect in their understanding. And humuq in Arabic is also the name for wine. Well, wine has many names, but one of the names for wine in Arabic is al-humqu. And the reason why they call it al-humqu is because it's the cause of hamaqa, because it causes you to lose your mind. It causes you to not be able to use your mind. So that's the idea you have to think of. It's not someone who's otherwise intelligent and is acting rationally or reasonably. In fact, it's someone who has something actually wrong with them. But they may look okay from the outside, right? And the Imam is going to tell us how this plays out. So he says, this is someone who spent a small time in pursuit of learning, studying something in a way of the various religious sciences, and so out of his stupidity here meaning someone who shows a lack of judgment, right? And a lack of judgment based on a lack of understanding. And so out of his stupidity, he interrogates and queries the great scholar who has passed his entire life studying the sciences. And this idiot, but again in a technical sense, he's not putting someone down. I.e. this person who just doesn't get things, right? In his ignorance, he thinks that what is a problem for him is also problematic for the great scholar. That should show you the level of someone's, where they're at. That they think, I've studied for 2 weeks, and he's studied for 20 years, and so I'm finding this thing a problem. He must also find it a problem. Not knowing that this person understands knowledge in a way that you don't. In other words, there's got to be something wrong with you intellectually to think that you are somehow on a par with a scholar. Now, ironically, if we do see that today, it doesn't make anyone less of an ahmaq. It may just be that there's more of them around now. Again, not in a denigrating sense. In a sense that someone actually reads 2 books and thinks they know something now, and they don't need scholars, because my understanding suggests this. Well, that is a type of stupidity, it's a type of foolishness, it's a type of idiocy. But in what way? That there's something wrong with your understanding, you're not getting it. And so what the Imam says is that this person thinks that whatever is a problem for him must also be a problem for the great scholars. Since he does not know even this much, his questioning is due to his foolishness, and you should not engage in answering him. Someone who has literally studied for 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years, and they think that they have reached profound understanding in things, such that they're asking, questions of the highest magnitude. For instance, I'll give you a classic one. Why do evil things happen in the world when Allah exists? Or if Allah knows everything, then what does it mean that we have free will to act? Right? And why does Allah allow all of these things to happen in the world like we see, in different parts of the world, right? And I think it should be understand. Come on. These aren't questions that should come to a mind that is submitted to the understanding that Allah huwa al-mudabbir. He is the one who plans and arranges and discharges everything that happens. And it's also not the understanding of someone who gets that there are consequences in the world. And by consequences, what do I mean? Is that anything that happens in this world has a commensurate and corresponding consequence in the next world. So la samahallah, we ask Allah, of course, for afi and salama, but if someone is going through difficulties, that difficulty is not in vain. It's not that you're in a difficult situation, it's not going to be accounted for, or you're not going to get recompense for it, or that Allah doesn't know about it, hasha. It's all just a theatre in which games are playing out for people, right? And we're told by Allah that this is how you're meant to navigate. And we've said it many, many times. One of the most profound things that we can do is read the seerah, because it's in the seerah that we find that the most beloved of all, and I say all in an unrestricted sense, I mean anything Allah created, is also the most tested. And it's almost, you think that that's a counterintuitive understanding, because if you think, we can ask each one of us, what's the most beloved thing or the most beloved person in your life, or who is that? And you'll say, oh, so-and-so is the most beloved person to me. Now, what would you expect in your love to that person? You'd expect that you treat them well and that you don't let any harm come to them, and you'd want, right? But here we have a scenario in which the best of all of Allah's creation is the most tested, right? And that should then teach us a lesson in how to understand the difficulties that we're meant to face. That this is an arena of tests. It's not an arena to be happy. And if we're going to engage this world to chase after happiness, you're chasing after the red sulfur, as they say. Something which doesn't really exist in this world. Why? Because what's the name of the next world? Darus Sa'ada, the abode of happiness. And what's remarkable about that name is Sa'ada in Arabic comes from the same root word to assist someone, because Sa'ada yusa'idu means to help someone, to be in their assistance. In other words, our happiness in the next world is related to the extent to which we are of use and of value to other people. And that's ultimately what's going to lead to felicity. But when we get into this thing about, I mean, can you imagine, look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Are there any instances that you find from the Prophet ﷺ or the companions where they speak about the concept of happiness? Why are we not finding happiness in life? Why are we not finding that this was, we can't seem to set up a home, or we can't seem to, buy the furniture, or we can't seem to, whatever. No, these people were here for one purpose, which is to make Allah's deen the beginning and the end. To make Allah's word the highest thing in existence. That's it. There wasn't no. So that's why we can see that the Prophet ﷺ, to take some examples, that he buried all of his children apart from one before he left the world. That's unfathomable for a parent to think about that. That those who have children, you think, especially when they're small, and if they leave the world, la samahullah, before you, they say it's the worst thing that a father can do or a mother can do is bury their own child. And the Prophet ﷺ buried all of his children apart from one, and the one that stayed behind joined him after 6 months. Right? And then if you look at the fact of him being known and recognized as a Sadiq al-Amin, meaning there was no one in Makkah that didn't vouch for the fact that he was the most honorable and just human being that they knew. But when he said Allah is one, they began to persecute everyone. Right? They began to chase everyone out. They wanted to bring this affair to an end. But what does Allah say? Allah, He will bring His light to completion. وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. Even though those who disbelieve may not like it. And we can go on and on. Of course, this is a seerah class then, in the sense that the seerah is there to instruct us in this idea that, look, the questions that we have, put them in the context of what your belief is. Because do you believe that Allah is a mudabbir, that He discharges everything? Do you believe that it's all in His hands? Do you believe that anything that's going to happen for you and to you is going to be for good? The Prophet ﷺ said, "Ajaban li amr al-mu'min." How wondrous is the affair of the believer. Everything that happens for him is good. If you were to get pricked by a pin, it's all good. Right? Because he has a reward for that. So that's what the reason why I'm mentioning this is because let's not let our foolishness, i.e. our lack of judgment and foresight, because don't forget that's one of the meanings of the word intellect in Arabic, is to be able to see the consequences of things. Don't let it lead us into these realms where we begin to question things about our lives and about circumstances and about the things that happen. That's called Imām. Everything is good, not a problem. Now, does it mean we don't cry? Does it mean we don't have moments of being upset? No, it's human nature. But what should override us ultimately is these great virtues. Virtues of patience, virtues of understanding that everything is in Allah's hands. So that's the second type of ignorance that is incurable. Someone who's foolish. The third type is someone who is asking for guidance, and everything he does not understand in the discussion of the great scholars is put down by him to his own shortcomings in his own knowledge. And his questioning is to learn. So this is a good thing. He's saying, look, I don't get it. It's not because they're not explaining it to me, I just don't understand it. Right? So he's questioning to learn. However, he is unintelligent. Doesn't grasp realities. You might explain to him, he just doesn't get it. Explain to him again, doesn't get it. Explain to him again and again and again, and it just doesn't get it. And you may encounter people like that if you live long enough. What are we told about this person? Thus, you should not engage in answering him. Why? Because, again, it's not because you think ill of him, it's actually not helping him. And it's neither it's just the way someone are really simple-minded. Don't get things. Leave them be. Because Allah's Messenger ﷺ said, we, the assemblies of the prophets, have been commanded to address men in proportion to their intellects. Naam. That nahnu ma'ashir al-anbiya umirna an nukallim an-nas ala qadri uqulihim. It's actually to address people in proportion to their intellects. And then as for the sickness which is curable, it is that of someone who is asking for guidance. But look at the features that the Imam speaks about. Who is intelligent, understanding, but importantly, someone who's not overwhelmed by envy, anger, the love of reputation, prestige and wealth, and is a true seeker of the straight path. Because if you want to take one thing home from the things that we say in these majalis, you should really write this down, and this is, for me, one of the most important things. Knowledge must be grounded in some form of ethics. It must be grounded in God consciousness, in fear of Allah, in wanting to do the right thing, in piety. If knowledge isn't grounded in Allah, it's not grounded in piety, in fearing Allah, you can say whatever you want. Why? Because then what's going to happen is that we use our knowledge to just justify. We'll find all these opinions that will suit us. Right? Not what we should be doing, but what I want to be doing, and I'm going to look. So the deen now becomes for me a supermarket. A supermarket where I'm going to shop from it whatever I feel comfortable with. And wherever I don't find something, I'm just going to put it down to, there was a bygone era, they didn't really understand our reality and they've gone, and we've got different contexts and whatnot. That's one of the things about having an intelligent person who's unfair to others. Like I've said before, how can it be that someone of a genius level intellect produced the atomic bomb? Are we saying that there wasn't a time in human history that the generations that came before us, that they couldn't have invented or done things which were wondrous? Well, we already have those things. We still don't know how they built the pyramids, for example. Right? But what we do have is an understanding that the generations that went before us, the civilizations that came before us, they always had a regard for consequence. We're going to do X, and as the Red Indians would say, we would think 7 generations down as a consequence of what we're doing. How will it affect those people 7 generations away from us? Whereas now we have a complete disregard for what's happening next week. As long as we can earn the money today, as long as we can improve our lives today. And that's one of the critiques of progress. Progress is not always good if it has no regard for consequence. And we are the age of progress. In fact, it's become one of the buzzwords of our age. We're a people of progress. Look what we've achieved. But achieved at what have we done? We've broken families. We've broken societal structures, neighborly relations. We've not just neighborly relations in terms of the guy people who live next door to you. We're talking about countries. People no longer get on. The divide between understanding a certain group of people against another group of people, or one religion. Why? Because we need to just be, in the eyes of those who want us to be seen that way, consumers. We have no utility apart from that. Are you an individual that has more to offer society? It doesn't matter. Can you purchase something? That's what we need to understand. And the greatest minds are thus deployed and employed in trying to work out what are the smartest ways to fool people into buying things, to deceive people into buying things. Because if you look at modern advertising is that. It's deception. It's to convince you that we need something that we don't. The modern world is masterful in creating need where it doesn't exist. Right? I'll give you an example, or an insight here into other traditions. In the Catholic tradition, they have different orders, the Jesuits, the Dominicans, etc. If someone is part of an order, they have to take what's called a vow of poverty. It basically means that they own no possessions. They don't own any possessions, beg your pardon. They do not own any possessions. And even if they earn a salary, it goes to the common good. And they need to justify to their superior that I need, for example, a new suit. And they write it down on a piece of paper, and the superior says to them, but you just bought one last year. What's the need for this one? And so the idea is that you buy what's necessary for you, but everything else goes back into the community. They're not consumers. Right? Because that's a very profound way of practicing your deen. Now that's no less than what we have in our understanding, because we don't need to take a vow of poverty Out of our poverty is taking a shahada, is to say we will assist other people. Right? Sadaqah is a core part of who we are, right? So that's the fourth type of person that can be cured. The seeker of the straight path, whose questioning and querying are not out of envy, obstinacy, or desire to test. This man is curable. This person is curable. And it is permissible to engage in a reply to his question. In fact, replying to him is obligatory for you. So they are the four types of ignorance. 3 cannot be cured and 1 can. And just to make it clear, those, the third one isn't, it's just someone who's simple-minded. You don't think bad of someone, right? The first one is the one who's, there's a defect in their understanding, right? The second thing to give up is that you are on guard against becoming a preacher or admonisher, for it involves much harm unless you first practice what you preach and then preach it to people. Think of what was said to Isa alayhi salam, O son of Mary, preach to your soul, and if it learns its lesson, preach to people. Otherwise, show humility before Allah. In other words, this thing here, that you have people sitting up on this chair, this is a very dangerous position to be in. And that doesn't just go for someone who can sit in this chair, but anyone who has any responsibility of, let's say, admonishing people, whether that be as a teacher or just as a da'i. And the Imām points out here why. He two reasons. He says, if you are put to the test with this occupation, i.e. with, admonishing people, reminding people, he would be careful of 2 traits. First is pretentiousness in talking. Pretentiousness is essentially when someone is attempting to impress you by using complicated language or making the affair to be more important than it actually is. Or their learning is limited, but they're covering their learning and coming across as being more knowledgeable, and they're using complicated language to cover that. Right? Pretentiousness is never a great idea. And the way that because why? Because at the level of admonishing, it must be to the regard of the people that you're talking to. So if you're having a class or a gathering and it's to do with general public, then your manner of speaking should be such that they understand what you're saying. But if you're going to use language they don't understand, then you have to see, well, what's the purpose of that? Because the purpose here is to admonish, and you're doing something which is putting them to sleep. So pretentiousness is in talking, and the Imam explains, by way of idioms, allusions, outbursts, verses, and poems. You're using all of these different things, complicated speech. For Allah the Exalted detests the pretentious. The pretentious and excessive man exhibits an inward decadence and the indifference of his. Why? Because what this person hasn't understood is that the whole purpose why you sit and admonish people is so that they can understand. But if you're using language that they're not going to understand, then you're really indifferent to them. You don't really care about them. The idea of admonition is for the worshipper to recollect the fire of the hereafter and his own remissness in the service of the Creator. To consider his past life which he has spent in what did not concern him, and consider what difficulties lie before him, such as the absence of firmness of faith in life's final moments, the nature of his state in the clasp of the angel of death, and whether he will be capable of answering munkar and nakir. That he worry about his state during the resurrection and its episodes, and whether he will cross the bridge safely or tumble into the bliss. That's the purpose of someone who admonishes. They're meant to serve as a reminder to people. The recollection of these things should remain in his heart and upset his apathy. To foment these fires and lament these calamities is termed admonition. In other words, tadhkir, reminding someone, is saying, listen, there's a judgment. It's coming. The grave. It's coming. Munkar and nakir. They're coming. Death. It's coming. What have you done? What have we all done for that in preparation? It's to stir in our mind. The reason why it's called tadhkir is because it's something you already know. That's the meaning of dhikr. Dhikr in Arabic is to say something you already know. Ilm is to have something that you didn't know. So here we're trying to bring to someone's attention that, look, growing up or whatever it was, these realities and they're coming. We can't be unmindful of them. So the idea of someone, that's why they always say that there has to be, like a Jumu'ah, for example. The Jumu'ah is meant to be that. It's meant to admonish us. They say that when the Prophet ﷺ would give the khutbah on the Jummah, it's like he was commanding an army. That's how serious it was. And if you look at the great khutbah, those who give khutbah on a Friday, that you should leave the khutbah having been stirred to fight the war against our souls. Today's the day that I'm going to... And tabarakallah, you do hear people that, what made you change? I heard a Jummah khutbah and it really reminded me, and I thought that was at times, I need to fix up. So that's tazkir. But then you have what's called wa'adh, as the Imam mentions on the next page. And he says, informing mankind and apprising them of these things, warning them of their remissness and negligence, making them see the defects of their egos, so that the heat of these fires impinges on the congregation. In other words, it's like you're feeling it right now. And the calamities disturb them so that they make amends for their past lives as far as possible. And they are distressed by the days past in disobedience to Allah the Exalted. All this in this way is termed preaching. So in other words, part of preaching is to remind us that, look, by default, you do know that our souls, we're prone to excesses in ourselves, our egos, and we must discipline ourselves and practice that discipline until we meet Allah. There's no such thing as disciplining our soul and it comes to an end. No. Disciplining the soul is something that accompanies us. It's like going to the gym. Don't just do it for a week and until you feel that you're in shape and you stop. Come back in a month, you'll be back to where you started. That's why it's called disciplining. It's called spiritual exercise. And the whole point it's called spiritual exercise is because if you stop it, you'll go back to where you were. Right? It's as if now look at this example. It's as if you saw that a flood bore down on an individual's house with him and his family inside. Now what would you say to this person? And you said, look out, run from the flood. In these circumstances, does your heart long for you to give the owner of the house your message with pretentious expressions, anecdotes and allusions? That you begin to advise this person, look, there's a flood coming, or there's a fire, the back garden's on fire. Are you going to now say, what's the best line of poetry that I can think about? Or what's the greatest allusion that I can give him? Right? The great parable of the ancients. No, it's immediate. You need to tell them right now. And what's the way you're going to do it? Run! It's right there. What's wrong with you? That's what he's saying. A preacher is the one who, the immediacy of the hour, as Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, اقتربت للناس حسابهم. That the hour is that correct? اقترب للناس حسابهم. أين الحفاظ? Now that the hour is approaching. But people are just wandering around, completely unaware. And that's why having a majlis at least once a week, twice a week, to bring us back and just remind us. And look, sometimes, we'll find it could be the case that someone who's giving that type of admonition, it may just be that they're not that emotive, or there might not be someone who arouses you and really stirs in you. It doesn't matter. Listen to what they're saying, that this person is speaking about some defect in me. That's the way to listen to a wa'idh. If we're sitting there like statues thinking, right, I'm only going to be moved until this person delivers some absolutely Braveheart type speech, and only then am I going to feel that this is worthy of my attention. No, we misunderstood. The idea is that, look, it doesn't matter who's saying it. As long as they're saying something that's related to the deen and admonishing us and reminding us, what we're meant to be thinking about is, how does it relate to me? Of course, the worst thing that you can do is think, how does that relate to someone else? Yeah, I know someone like that, thinking of someone, what's being said, and think, yeah, miskeen, they really need to think about these things. No, it's about us. So that's what the Imam says about and then the second trait, because what's the first? The first was on page 48, which is the one who's, admonishing people. But the first thing you should be wary of is pretentiousness. The second trait is that your effort in your preaching should not be for the people in your congregation to roar or to show hysteria and to tear their clothes, such that it is said, what a gathering that was. For all this is worldliness, and that is produced by indifference. Rather, your zealous intention must be to lead people from the world to the hereafter. From recalcitrants, i.e., someone who's recalcitrant is someone who's stubbornly disobedient to authority. And you're trying to take them from that stubbornness to obedience. Or from acquisitiveness, in other words, someone who really has a deep love for the dunya and to acquire the dunya, from that state to renunciation, to give up things, right? From stinginess to generosity, from doubt to certainty, from indifference to vigilance, and from illusion to God consciousness. In other words, we should leave gatherings of dhikr, gatherings of where we're being reminded and admonished, really bothered somewhat. What we shouldn't be doing is, so where are we going now? What's the evening plan? Because it kind of like means that we've not really paid attention to what's been said. It should have, otherwise it's just watching an episode of some series that's going on TV, that it was good and you enjoyed it and it had some meaning, but after that it's finished. Or you listen to the news and the horrific world events and you just turn the channel. Nothing, like, it's dead inside. There's nothing that happens. Someone who says what a wondrous class is not getting the point of what this is all about. I mean, rarely you'll hear this idea amongst the mashayikh, that they're giving a wa'adh and at the end everyone gets up, mashallah, Sayyidi hadha dars kan mumtaz, or something like that, it was moving. And no, people leave in a state of vigilance, of attentiveness, that something's been said that I'm meant to be reminded about, and I need to really go and reflect about it. In other words, if we're not thinking about what we've heard, what did we come here for? Don't get me wrong, there's a reward in it. We're trying to step it up. Like, how do we benefit from gatherings of any gathering of deen, right? So that's what the Imam is saying. Don't say what a gathering it was, for all this is worldliness. And so he says, you should evoke in them love of the afterlife and loathing for the world. You should teach them about worship and asceticism, in other words, not wanting the dunya. Do not allow them to be complacent due to the kindness of Allah, the exalted, glorious and majestic, and His mercy. In other words, because some people think Allah's merciful, doesn't matter, I'll just be I'll engage in my dunya, and then Allah Ghafur Rahim. Allah Ghafur Rahim, and don't worry, it's all good. That's being complacent. It's thinking that you are in some stead with Allah, that you have some standing with Allah, that don't worry, me and Allah, we have an understanding. He's going to forgive me. That's a type of arrogance. And so that's one of the functions of the admonisher, is to bring people out of that complacency. And why does the Imam say this? Because he says, since predominating in their natures is disinclination from the path of the divine. I mean, the Arabic says, لِأَنَّ الْغَالِبْ فِي طِبَاعِهِمْ الزَّيْغ. And he kind of like, it sort of says that not necessarily it's predominating, it's kind of in us that you can be like that. Not that it's going to be like that. There's a subtle difference in the sense that it's not that every single person is going to be, go away from the path or doesn't want to. No, there's some people who naturally are inclined to the path. Right? But there's a propensity in human beings because of the nafs al-ammara, the soul that sort of prompts you to go on to fulfill your desires, to disincline from the truth, disincline from the things that Allah wants. And that's what the Imam is saying. To drive in what displeases Allah the Exalted and getting tripped up by bad morals. Put fear into their hearts, alarm them and put them on their guard regarding the dangers they will face. Perhaps their inward qualities will be transformed and their outward behavior exchanged. Acquisitiveness and an appetite for obedience and for repentance from disobedience will appear. This then is a right way to preach and advise. And all preaching not thus is a curse upon both the speaker and the listener. It is said that the former is a ghoul, a demon who sweeps men off the path and destroys them, and they must run from him. Since this speaker will wreak havoc on their religion, the like of which even Shaitan himself cannot. It is incumbent on whoever has now look at this. It is incumbent upon whoever has the wherewithal and capability to get him down from the pulpits and to prevent him from sermonizing. For this is part of enjoining good and forbidding evil. In other words, if you find someone who's just exactly as the Imam is saying, pretentious, disregard what's actually of benefit to the people, sermonizing in a way that has no meaning. The Imam is saying, if you can, you should prevent this person from. Why? Because you're actually potentially disinclining people from following what they should be following. Now, the third thing to give up of the four is that you have nothing to do with princes and rulers. Any form of authority that involves princes and rulers. And neither should you see them, because the spectacle of them, gatherings with them and socializing with them are a serious danger. If you are put to test by this, avoid praising them and complimenting them. For Allah the Exalted is angered if a wrongdoer or tyrant is praised. And whoever prays for their long life wants Allah to be disobeyed on this earth. Of course, this is in reference to tyrants and rulers who sow tyranny in the world. And generally speaking, we should not want to be in positions of power or around people of power, because it kind of can really question your behavior and the way. Because look, when you're around people who have some standing, you want to ingratiate yourself towards them. And look, that's exactly what the Imam says on the next page. Is the fourth thing to give up is to accept nothing of the benefaction of princes nor their presence, even if you know they were acquired legitimately, right? Because he says, for expecting from them degrades the religion, in that sycophancy. What's sycophancy? It's to be excessively obedient to someone of power because you're expecting something in return. You wouldn't be like that normally, but because you know this person has some authority, and look, this doesn't have to apply to princes and kings, it can be to your boss, right? It could be to anyone that you has some, to a rich person, for example, someone you know that can pull the strings. And if you're seeing that you're acting in a way which is excessively servile and obedient, it means that you're, as the Imam says, it's a form of degrading your deen, right? Because you'll act in a way that you won't ordinarily act like. So that's why, what's the better way? Just close that door completely. Don't be around people of authority. Don't be around people of power. Don't be around people that you think can do something for you in the high echelons and the high corridors. Don't seek them out. Don't want to be with them. Why? Because the Mudabbir al-Amr is Allah. It's not the person you think it is in the world. And this is what I say, we've said many times. If you read hadith all the time, what does Imam Ghazālī say? Let's go back. It all comes back to Imam Ghazālī and what he says, that when you teach a child about his deen, the first thing that you're meant to inculcate in them is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then you're meant to inculcate in a child a love for the Quran, to read the Quran and to reflect on its meanings. And then you're meant to inculcate into a child to read hadith and to inculcate a love of hadith. Now imagine a child is reading the Quran, is reading the hadith. What will they find in the hadith? It will say that if all of mankind and all of the jinn came together and they want you to do something to benefit you, they won't be able to do it. Now if this is markuz, if this is grounded in your mind, in your being, everyone else you become indifferent to them. You know that they have nothing to give us beyond what Allah can give us. And so they then become principles, you see. And I've said this before. Hence, hadith and the Quran are like axioms. Axioms in what sense? They are the basis upon which we ground everything. If we find ourselves listening to quotes of, I don't know, Confucius or someone, or Marcus Aurelius, and we think this is marvelous quotes that we're finding, we've actually misunderstood that, you know what, as good as what they're saying, ultimately there's grounding for this in revelation. There's grounding for this in the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. All it means that we're not reading enough of it. And then hence, we need to ask ourselves that question, what is our hizb of the Quran every single week? Do we have a hizb? Do we read, a line a day? Do we read a page a day? Do we read 10 pages a week? When was the last time we did a khatam of the Quran? It should be something that we endeavor. Look, there's probably about, I don't know how many people here, right? You can literally get 30 people in a room, and you can nowadays just get together and read one juz, right? one juz a week, and you've done one khatam as a group. In a month you're doing 4 khatam, in a year 50. This is khairat, isn't it? I'm sure people do that, of course they do. But it's a question nonetheless that we have to be asking ourselves, are we doing it if we're not doing it? And that's the Quran. But what about the hadith? Are we reading enough hadith? How many hadith do we actually read? Hadith have been in translation for years. And okay, fine, some of them may not be the greatest translations, but sometimes it's besides the point. Because why? A heart that seeks the truth, the language that may be deficient, Allah will make the meaning appear. No doubt about that. And I remember back in the late 90s, I found the translation of Sahih Muslim. I didn't read Arabic at that time. And an English translation, can you believe that? Of Sahih Muslim. Never knew it existed. And the fact that these works are available, you can just open them up and read the hadith. Okay, someone can say, look, Muslim, it contains hadith which are sometimes of a nature which are technical, and maybe people shouldn't. Fine, granted, accept your point. But how about books like the Ribat Salihin? Fully translated. It's the book of character, how to develop your character, refine your character, how to understand the circumstances of the world that we live in, and how to comport through the life of the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, right? So Riyadh al-Salihin should be something that we read all the time. Or, for example, the Arba'in of Imam Nawawi. That should be like a constant thing that we're reading all the time. Why? Because they are the principles of our deen. Or the Adhkar of Al-Imam al-Nawawi, which is now in English translation as well, which is essentially a book about, it's quite a hefty volume as well, and there's a hadith that relate to certain occasions and which dua that you should make on different occasions. Now, I'm not saying that people incorporate that every single thing into the, but let's read it at least and see. Wow, I mean, there's a dua for every. If we saw the companions, I think, as I've said before, that we'll be unsettled by being around them because we'd realize that they are immersed in what it means to be abid. They're immersed in Allah and His Messenger alayhi salam, because I think we'll be disturbed by the fact that everything they do is aligned to Allah. And as you said, what did Hassan al-Basri say? I saw a group of people that had you seen them, you'd think they're mad people, right? Because the level of practice was such that it was way beyond any, I wonder how they'll look at us. Not that they look at us in any bad way, of course, because they're great people, but are we part-timers? We live deen in moments. We kind of have moments where we feel that we have deen and maybe then we can, how much of our day is actually not the moments where we should be who we are, right? And each one of us needs to take ourselves to account. Is that with our family? I mean, look, I see people, many great good people, people who are trying their best, but their relationship with their families, especially within spousal relationships, is like horrendous. They don't treat their families well, don't treat their children well, don't treat their parents well, right? Well, deen is something that must be actualized from there. That's the fount of it all. It starts from treating our parents, our spouses, our children, our neighbors well. What deen do we think we're trying to practice if our deen is a show that manifests itself in certain contexts to people? I wonder what that person would say if they see me not going to pray. Or I wonder what that person... That's clearly not the way that we have to look at deen, right? And the key is always that. What are you like behind closed doors? And in fact, what are you like when the door closes, when no one is there? What are the thoughts that you think? We can understand who we are in relation to Allah. And don't get me wrong, we're not saying that people don't sin. No one's saying that. But the idea is that, what does Allah say in the Quran about sinning? That if people fall into error, they detest the error that they've fallen into. It doesn't say that you're never going to fall into error, but just recognize the fact that, at least have distaste for the fact that you did that. And as long as we can have that, then inshallah, we will leave the things that we're doing. But there has to be a conscious understanding of developing ourselves as human beings. So where are we? The fourth thing, and we'll finish here, that to give up, the fourth thing to give up is to accept nothing of the benefaction of princes nor their presents, even if you know they were acquired legitimately. For expecting it from them degrades religion, in that sycophancy, partiality for them, and complicity in the tyranny are produced by it. All this is corruption in deen. The least of its harm is that when you receive their donations and profit from their material possessions, you begin to like them. And whoever likes an individual prefer them to have a long life, unavoidably, because you want khair for them, right? Preferring, and this you'll see this, we tend to have this idea, I'll be good to you if you're good to me. If you say something nice about me, then that means I have to be nice back to you. No, we are good with everyone, whether someone is good to us or not. And where it needs to be said in the right way, with the right comportment, where you think something is not correct, it has to be flagged up as well. Of course, if you have the capacity to do it, I'm not saying you got vigilante style and start saying things to people, but it has to be done in measure and has to be something which proceeds from principles. Cannot be, I'll mention this in the questions and answers. Preferring the survival of the tyrant constitutes a desire for the creatures of Allah the Exalted to suffer tyranny, and a desire for the world's ruination. What is worse than this for religion and our final ends? Beware the demon's suggestions, or some people's talk to you does not deceive you to the effect that the best and the most appropriate thing is for you, because some people might think this, which is, oh no, it's okay, take the money from them. Why? Because what you can do is you can then give it to the poor. But what the Imām is saying is that, no, you can't even think like that. Why? For the accursed one, Shaitan, has severed many people's necks by these whisperings. Just take it from these rich and powerful people and these princes and give it to the poor. So don't even go there, because you don't know how that's going to open up doors for you. You might think that that's what you're doing, but the fact is that once you become complicit in that type of relationship, where is it going to end? And he says, we have mentioned this in the revival of the sciences, Ihya Ulumuddin, so look for it there. So we'll stop here inshallah.